Welcome back, everyone. Today we're going to be going over your grammar for stage 13, and we're going to be talking about verbs again. And we're going to be talking about how we can place all of the verbs that we have in Latin into four different families. It's pretty similar to when we talked about declensions. Remember, if we could put any noun that we've had into one of three declensions. First declension if it's feminine, second declension if it's masculine. Third declension is kind of the grab bag of if it's masculine or feminine and looks kind of weird. Well, we can do the same with verbs. And when we put a verb into a family, we put it into a conjugation. All right, a conjugation tells us which of the four verb families any given verb is a part of. And you might ask, well, how do we tell what family a verb belongs to? And we do so through its infinitive. Every verb in Latin has something called an infinitive. An infinitive is an unaltered version of a verb. It has no conjugation. It has not been altered. So, as we've talked about before, whenever we want to change the subject of who's doing an action, whenever we want to show that sort of meaning, we put an ending on the end of a verb. So if I want to show that I am doing an action, I'd put an O on the end. If I want to show that you are doing an action, I'd put an S on the end. If I want to show he, she, or it is doing an action, I'd put a T on the end. But there are versions of verbs in which they have not yet had that alteration. They've not yet been given a subject, and those are infinitives. And all infinitives end in RE. Now we can place all these infinitives into four different families based on the vowel that comes before the RE. So a first conjugation verb is a verb with an infinitive that ends in ARE. Second conjugation verbs have the ERE with a long mark. Third conjugation verbs have an ERE without a long mark. And fourth conjugation verbs have an IRE. Now, this governs every verb. So if you've been noticing really carefully, you might notice that in most present tense verbs, there are different vowels that come before the ending. So here in introt, we have an A before the T, whereas for this second conjugation verb, we have an E before the T. Now, third is going to be awful and hard, just like everything in Latin. Third declensions, third conjugations are trouble. So when we look at a third conjugation verb, you might expect there to be an E before the T, but no, it's an I. And then fourth conjugation, we have an IT. So all of those verbs that we've had, we could place them into the conjugations, and they are governed by that vowel that comes before the ending. So as I just said, every infinitive in Latin ends in an RE for the present tense. So whenever we see an infinitive, we're going to always translate it as to blank. So our example here, intrare, ends in an RE, and we translate it as to enter. All right, again, you can do this for any verb that we've encountered so far in Latin. Put an RE on the end, it means to blank. So you might wonder, well, what are these used for? Well, there's several very important uses. They're really important for us when we're writing Latin and forming different tenses, because we basically take the infinitive to form our present and imperfect that we've learned previously. So if we want to write he enters in Latin, it's really easy to do so if we know the infinitive. So if we know that the infinitive of enter, to enter, is intrare, if we want to write it in the present tense, all we have to do is remove the RE and add a T, and that becomes intrat. And it's also really easy to form the imperfect if you know the infinitive. If we want to say he was entering, we take intrare, the infinitive, take off the RE, add a BAT, and we get intrabat. So that's one way that it helps us as language learners learn Latin. But what we're going to see more in this chapter is are infinitives used as complementary verbs. In most languages, there are some verbs that can't really show all the information that they want. They can't express a full idea without another verb. Verbs such as being able to or wanting to. All those verbs usually need another verb next to it, and that's what we call a complementary verb. And those complementary verbs in Latin will be infinitives. So if you want to say, I am able to work, that to work has to be expressed through the use of an infinitive. Or I want to leave needs to be expressed through an infinitive. So as I just said, the verbs where you most commonly will see these infinitives are with these three different verbs. Wolo, one of our new vocab words meaning to want, nolo, meaning to not want, and possum, meaning to be able to. That's where you're going to see these infinitives, these verbs with the RE pop up. Now, each of these verbs are called something nice. They're called something irregular verbs, because they are verbs that change their appearance as you conjugate them, as you go through the chart here. So our verb wolo, to want, if you notice, goes from wolo, then it changes all the way to wis, then it becomes wolt, then it becomes wolumus, then it becomes woltus, and then it becomes wolunt. Now, I'm not going to test you over this chart, and if you notice, the endings still are the same: OSC, MUSTIS, and NT, but they will change. So they're not that tricky. I mean, if you see anything that has like this VOL, or in this chapter anything really with a V, you'll know it's probably the verb to want. But just be aware that it does change as we go through the chart. Same thing for this one, nolo. So nolo in the first person is nolo, then it becomes non-wis, non-wolt, nolumus, non-woltus, nolunt. All right. And then for the irregular verbs, then for our final irregular verb, we have our verb possum. If you notice, it comes from our verb sum, meaning is. So possum looks like this: possum, potest, potest, possumus, potestus, possunt. This means to be able to. So again, it changes as we go through the conjugation. So these are the most common verbs you will see with those infinitives. So what I want you to do down here, all right, I want you to practice. Now I'm going to do one for you as kind of an example, but I'm going to want you to translate these out into English. So as always, whenever we're translating a Latin sentence, we're going to go to the end and find our verb. So we have non-woltus, all right? So looking back at our new irregular chart, all right, we see, okay, non-woltus is this word meaning to not want. It's second person plural, ends in TIS, so y'all are not going to want something. All right, so y'all don't want. So that's the first translation. Oh, let's just do it over here. Y'all don't want. Now we go to our infinitive when we translate, the thing that ends in RE. And we're going to translate this as to blank. If you remember the verb responded from earlier, that means respond. So when we put this into an infinitive, we need to translate it as to respond. So y'all don't want to respond. And then we have ancili here, to the slave girl. Oh my gosh, there we go. Okay, so that's what I want you to do for all of these. Go first to your verb, and it's going to be one of those three special verbs we just learned. And then once you translate that, go to your infinitive and be sure that you translate it as to blank. So I'll go ahead and delete that. All right, so this will be part of an Ed puzzle. Please translate this and answer that on the Ed puzzle. All right, and that's it. That's it for our grammar for this chapter.